King of all days, glory to you in the highest place.
Okay, so last week we attempted to conquer the issue of God and his eternity and his being immaterial, and one of the big one was the timelessness. And that's a tough one to wrestle with. Thankfully, tonight we're going to go with some things a little more simple, a little more common, a little more easy to grasp, things that most people would think about and know about God, and it's not a big deal. I mean, you could teach this to little kids and they can get it. And so the three big, what's called the omnis, the big O's, that God is omnipotent, omnipresent, and omniscient. That he is all-powerful, all-present, and all-knowing. And so we're just going to unpack those three, look at maybe a few issues, questions or challenges that might come up, and then just see if we can get a grasp of what this means. First, that God is omnipotent, that he is all-powerful. Right? Well, whenever you think about God being all-powerful, well, what does that tend to think? I mean, pretty simple, right? God can do anything? Anything. Right? Omnipotent generally defines something like God has all power over all things at all times and in all ways. There is nothing in creation on heaven and earth that he does not have authority and power over. And so, Job 42 verse 2, this is Job saying, I know that you can do all things and that no plan of yours can be thwarted. Right? So anything God wants to bring about, it's coming about. No one can stop him. Nothing can hinder him. Nothing can sidetrack or derail his plans. It's going to happen. He has the power to see it through. And we can really get a good comfort in that, right? I mean, knowing that whatever God intends, whenever he promises something, he can get it done. Whenever he says, that is by my power that he saves, then we know that we are saved. There's nothing that's going to be able to wrestle us out of his salvation. But is there anything God can't do? I know you're looking at your notes, so you're just kind of...
He can't lie.
Right? And it can't. Two places... What's that?
Can't sin.
Can't sin, can't lie. Two places where it specifically mentions the lying, Hebrews 6:8 and Titus 1:2. I mean, just flat out say, God cannot lie. And so philosophers, skeptics might say, well, wait a minute. Isn't that a limit on God's power? Because that's something he can't do. But the way philosophers, theologians typically address that is, one, his nature is such that he is honest. And he can't violate his nature. He cannot do anything other than who he is. And who he is does not lie. And so it's not really that he lacks an ability, it's just that's who he is. And so another way of thinking about it is sin is a failure to accomplish something. So lying would be a failure to be honest. So actually if he lied, that lying would be a limitation on his power. Because that means he was not able to be perfect, honest. We talked about his nature, how he's perfect. And so everything he is to the infinite perfection degree. And so in order to be perfect, that means he would always be able to tell the truth. And to lie would be an imperfection. But God is perfect. It's just not in his nature to be able to do that. God cannot fail. That's part of his omnipotence, is that he cannot fail. And a lie would be a failure to tell the truth. So therefore, God can't lie. Also, God cannot do things that are logically impossible. For instance, God cannot make a married bachelor.
Like what?
A married bachelor. By definition, a bachelor is a person who is not married. So he cannot make a married bachelor. He cannot make a square circle. And it really kind of gets down to, because these things, we might put words together, but they don't really mean anything. right? We might be able to string together the phrase square circle, but it's gibberish. It means nothing. You might as well say God cannot create a blah, 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 blah. Right? It's nonsensical. It means nothing just because it uses words that we know. And so that's what's called a logical contradiction. It's logically impossible. So God cannot create, God cannot do gibberish. And so whenever someone says, oh, well, God can't make a honest politician or whatever, that it's, well, there's no such thing. Right? And so he can't make that. It's not a lack of his ability. It's because that thing doesn't exist. It's a nonsensical, logical impossibility. Like, could God make a rock so big that even he couldn't lift it? Right? That's that classic, right? Because if he can't make the rock, then he's not all powerful. But then if he can't lift it, he's not all powerful. Well, it's a contradiction. On one, just the idea of a rock so big God couldn't lift it is inherently incoherent on its own. But then also it kind of divides God into two people, the one making the rock and the one lifting the rock, which makes no sense because he's not two, he's one. And so the whole notion of the question is utterly ridiculous. It's an absurd question. And so that is God's power. He has the power to do anything and everything, as long as it's, actually coherent and not in violation of his character, who he is. So then we have God is omnipresent. Right? And just to give you the word history, meant to do this with the omnipotent, right? That word omni means all. And then in the case of omnipotent, potent means powerful or able, right? So he's all powerful. On this one, omnipresent, he's all present. He's present everywhere. His presence is continuous throughout all creation. There is no cubic centimeter, no atom. There is nothing anywhere throughout all creation that God is not present in his creation. Psalm 139, verses 7 through 12, says, where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall fall on me, even the night shall be light about me. Indeed, the darkness shall not hide me from you. But the night shines as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike to you. Right? Nothing is hidden from God. You can't get away from him. That's both a terrifying and comforting realization. Amen? If you're kind of guilty and shamed and being wicked, that's a terrifying prospect that you can't get away from God, right? But if you are, in need of comfort, if you're in sorrow, if you're in grief, hey, there is nowhere you can go that God is not there for you and there with you. One of the ways that we can kind of understand this is his sustaining power, that God upholds the universe. He is sustaining everything in all places and all times in creation. So there's no place in creation that doesn't have him actively upholding it. Colossians 1:16 says, for by him all things were created that are in heaven and on the earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created through him and for him, and he is before all things, and in him all things consist. That word consist, different translations translate it hold together, or have their being, or subsist. The continuation, all things are being held by him. Hebrews 1:3, it says that he upholds the universe by the word of his power. I heard one person describe that creation is to God like music is to an orchestra. What happens when the orchestra stops playing? Music's gone. Music just is done. It's the continual playing of the orchestra that keeps the music going. In the same way, it is God's will that keeps creation in existence. Every planet going around, every star, every atom, everything going on, the trillions of cells in your body, they're all doing their thing. All of that is being upheld by his power. Well, if that's his power doing all of those things everywhere in all of creation in heaven and earth, then his presence is there also. He's perfectly aware of what's going on everywhere because he's there, upholding it. He has perfect awareness. There is nowhere in all of creation that he is not aware. However, you run into a little bit of a problem. Because there's places in the Bible that seem to indicate a removal from God's presence. Or God specifically being present somewhere. So it's like, well, hold on, how does that work? Because he's already everywhere. So one, how can he then be somewhere, again? Or because he was already there. So it doesn't make sense to say that God appeared or manifests whenever he was already there. And then how do you get removed from God? Where do you go that God isn't there? We just saw that he's everywhere. God's presence sometimes in Scripture is revealed in what's called his manifest presence. There is his omnipresence, that he's everywhere because he's upholding, sustaining the universe. Then there's what's called his manifest presence. He is not revealed in the same way to people at all times. Sometimes he appears different or not at all, and in different ways at different times to different people. You have the pillar of smoke. Remember the Israelites in the wilderness as they're being guided? He is present in the form of a cloud of smoke or a fire by night to guide them through the wilderness. Or you have where the Shekinah glory, the cloud, would settle on the tabernacle when Moses would go into the Holy of Holies. These are ways that he is manifesting his presence. You have the Lord appears to Abraham in the form of 3 travelers. Right? He's manifesting his presence. This is a different sense of his presence than just the fact that, well, God is everywhere. Right? He is everywhere because his power is upholding the universe. But he also specifically enters in, like the burning bush. Right? That was his presence manifested in that place for Moses. There's the question of God being in hell. Right? Because we often will hear that hell... we often hear that hell is separation from God. But it couldn't be total separation because he would be upholding hell. All things in heaven and earth and above and below. I mean, hell would be part of creation that he is sustaining and upholding. So technically his presence is there. So whenever we say we're removed from God's presence...
Removed from his favor, maybe.
Right, removed from his favor, removed from his manifest presence. Try to think of how to say this.
So God created hell, not the devil.
Right. Yeah, devil didn't create anything.
Right.
Yeah, God.
Chaos.
Yeah, except for some chaos. God creates hell, and it is intended for the devil. Actually, Matthew 25:41 says, he will say to those on his left, this is that, here you sit on my left, you sit on my right, this is the judgment kind of image given by Jesus. It says, he will say to those on his left, depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. And so hell was actually prepared for them, but everyone else gets thrown in there along with them. We get to share in the punishment of those we followed into rebellion. And so, but Revelation 14:10 says that he, referring to, trying to remember who exactly that's referring to in that. I just took a little snippet out of the context. I'm trying to remember when I read the context. I think it's referring to the beast or to Satan, or whatever. It says that he will be tormented with fire and sulfur in the presence of the holy angels, in the presence of the Lamb. So In hell, I mean, God is aware of hell. He's sustaining hell. It's his righteous justice and judgment being poured out. So it's not like, they're just cast off and forgotten about. But being removed from his presence is being removed from his favor, being removed from relationship, being removed from any meaningful idea that, you're in any kind of relationship to God. And so I think what happens a lot of times is called equivocation. Remember when we talked about some logical stuff, we talked about the logical fallacy of equivocation. One word that can have multiple meanings, and you take it and you use two different meanings in the same argument. And so you might say, oh, well, in hell we're removed from God's presence. Oh, but God is everywhere, so he's omnipresent. Well, okay, no, we're talking about two different uses of the term that don't actually mean the same thing. And so I think that's one way we get ourselves tripped up. And we need to try to stop, slow down, read, think, okay, words have more than one meaning. Does this word have more than one meaning and how I should understand it? And I think there we see that it does. Any other thoughts or questions on omnipotence or omnipresence? Okay. God's omniscience, right? Omniscience, omni meaning all. Science means knowledge. It's just the Latin word that means to know. So he knows all things. Omniscience. Psalm 139, verses 1 through 6 says, O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You understand my thoughts afar off. You comprehend my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. For there is not a word on my tongue, but behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You have hedged me behind and before. You laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. I cannot attain it. Psalm 147:5 says that his understanding is infinite. Jude 25 refers to God as the only wise God. And so we see there's plenty of other verses that talk about how God's knowledge is infinite. He knows all things. He is aware of all things. And so his perfect knowledge extends to all things, past, present, and future. He knows it all. One way that I've heard his omniscience described is that God knows the truth value of every statement. So if you were to say, it is 75 degrees outside, God knows if that's true or false. He knows what the temperature is outside. And he knows it accurately, and he knows it always. Any moment, any time, any day, any place, he would know that truth. God never learns. Isaiah 40 says, who has directed the Spirit of the Lord? Or as his counselor has taught him? With whom did he take counsel? And who instructed him and taught him the path of justice? Who taught him knowledge and showed him the ways to understanding? Right? Because to learn something would require ignorance. It would mean that at one point God didn't know something, and then he did. Well, okay, now go back to his perfection, go back to, right, his infinite. So in order for him to learn something, he wouldn't be God. It's in the nature of God that he would have this knowledge and be perfect. He knows himself, right? Whenever he reveals himself to Moses in the burning bush, right? Who shall I tell them sends me? Tell them I am, right? He's aware of his own being, his self-existence, his own nature of who he is. He knows everything possible. This is what's called counterfactuals. What if statements. He knows what you would do if something happened. Or if this happened, what would you do? And so he knows all those things. He knows without effort. He doesn't have to think about it. Right? So sometimes someone might ask you something. Hey, have you seen my keys? Oh, where did you put those? I remember you had them when you walked in, and you went over here. I remember you went in the bedroom. Yeah, right? God doesn't have to work it through like that. He just knows. He doesn't have to recall with any kind of effort The knowledge is just there. If he had to recall it, if he had to kind of exert some force to get it out, this would mean that at any given time his knowledge is not perfect. There would be a limitation on his knowledge. And that's not the case. He knows all things equally well. Right? There's nothing that he knows better than something else. He's not an expert on the Jewish people, but not really sure what's going over in China. Right? That's not that's not God. What?
That just sounds funny.
I've actually heard that kind of challenge, because it's like, oh, well, there's God, in there in the land of Canaan with the Israelites, and got that going on, but the Bible doesn't tell you anything about what's going on in China or India or Europe. Or it's like, well, yeah, because that's not the point of the Bible. But I've heard people talk as if, well, God just didn't know. Well, he knew, it just wasn't the point. And so Hebrews 4:13 says, there is no creature hidden from his sight, but all things are naked and open to the eyes of him to whom we must give account. All things just laid open. He knows there's nothing hidden or covered. He just knows it all. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I remember, and I think I mentioned this. I remember hearing a talk about, modesty and purity and all that, and the guy said, just imagine whenever you're, out on a date, and you're thinking of doing something, just imagine your future spouse was watching you. Which of course you kind of, okay, want to behave, It's like, what if this is being videotaped and your, future spouse would see it? Well, I don't know. How about, the sovereign creator of the universe to whom you are answerable was watching? How about that one? Because guess what? He is. And so, yeah, there's, he knows it all. Nothing's going to shock him. Okay. God's knowledge includes the future decisions that his free creatures would make. He knows what you're going to choose to do. Now, this creates a little bit of a problem for some people because they think that it means that if God knows what I'm going to do, then I have no choice in it. I have to do what he, knows. But the difference is he knows what you're going to choose. Remember, if omniscience is defined as God having, God knowing the truth value of any propositional statement. So, you get up in the morning and you have, you open your cupboard and you have cornflakes and Cheerios. He already knows which one you're going to choose. But he doesn't know it because it's just fate. It's your destiny. You're the one that does the choosing. He just knows what you're going to choose. So you say you choose the Cheerios. Well, what if I choose the other one? Well, then he would have known that, right? One way I've heard to explain this is perspective. Let's say that you are out back behind the church where you have a perfect view of Liberty Hill Road and what's that road? Runs Stockton. And so you got perfect view. You can see the cars coming down that way. You can see the cars coming this way. And you see someone coming down Liberty Hill, and they're not going to stop in time at that stop sign. They're going to go rolling out into that intersection. No way they can stop in time. Well, here comes someone tearing down Stockton, flying along, got their phone in their face while they're driving, and you can see what's coming. They can't see each other. It's kind of overgrown right there. But from where you're standing, you can see them, and here it comes. Does that mean that there was no choice? Did that person couldn't, choose to hit the brakes or something? Your perspective gives you awareness. You don't cause the accident by your knowledge. You just know it's coming. In that same way, God doesn't cause our choices. They're still ours to make. He can just see them coming. Does that make sense? And so people like to say that this necessarily means determinism. We have no free will because God knows what we will do. But knowing is not causing. Knowledge does not cause anything to happen. And so it's just a matter of his perspective, because of his omniscience, because of his timelessness, his awareness of all events and the what-if events. His awareness of all of this, he just knows what is going to happen, but he's not the one making it happen. So any other thoughts or questions on any of that?
It's like God knows everything. I mean, before you die, you go to the pearly gates. Why wait till Judgment Day? What we need, this sounds crazy, but God knows that you're going to turn out to be a nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't he just poof you in a ball of flame right there and just get you off the planet? Why wait till Judgment Day? I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah.
He knows. He knows everything.
If he knows, why wait?
And that's what other people need to see. Okay, this guy, say Hitler, for instance, he
Mm-hmm.
needs to go. Pow, ball of flame, he's gone.
Yeah.
Why wait?
We don't know. He sees the beginning from the end, and we don't. He's omniscient, and we're not.
Exactly.
In this, we'll actually talk about this next week, the whole problem of evil. If these things are true, then why does he allow? Why doesn't he? And
if other people would see that, they wouldn't do that.
yeah.
But he's
Well,
not going to judge till the end.
However, I think we can all, on a small scale, maybe a large scale, think of in our own life where what seemed otherwise useless or even evil worked out down the road to a good, right? That good can come from suffering. The Bible tells us he works in all things for the good of those who love him, that he has his plans, and that what we see in the Bible, that he brings about his will through the deeds of evil people. I mean, Assyria and Babylon, I mean, those are some just wicked people. But he used them as his instruments to get his purpose down the road, so to speak. Jesus was born in the Roman Empire, where at the time Christ comes on the scene, the Roman Empire stretched through most of the known world and had built roads. Prior to the Roman Empire, you had Alexander the Great, who unified a lot of that area under a single Greek language. And so Alexander the Great was no wonderful, person. The Roman Empire imposed its will by force and oppression. So some very evil regimes paved the way for the world to be ripe for the gospel to spread like fire through the world.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It was only through the wickedness. I mean, think about the kind of twisted mind that had to create crucifixion. But yet God used that towards a good end. And so I think one of the problems that we suffer from, and it's just the way it is our limited knowledge. We can only really play the short game. Right? God knows what the outcome centuries from now is going to be of something happening now. So we can look at something and go, man, why wouldn't God just, boom, have that done? Just don't even mess with it. Well, but that's going to lead to this, which will lead to this, which will lead to this, which, 200 years from now has something in motion that, is actually a good thing, part of his plan. And so basically that's where I get that is, hey, we don't know. The Bible says he knows the beginning from the end. And we don't. We see this. He sees that.
That's why I always have the question of predestiny.
Yeah.
He predestined me, you, Arlene, and Greg, and then not some other people.
Yeah.
I always struggle with that one.
Me too. Yeah. It's a rough one. Like Dr. Krause was saying Sunday, it's in there. Can't really avoid it. right? I mean, there's some verses that just flat out say, I chose you for this, right? And it's like, wow, okay, what do I do with that? But there's other passages that just clearly say that we turn to him, that we repent, that there is this us choosing and doing, and then others that was just, and it's like, how does that work? How does that even go together?
What's the right word? Not a drive, but maybe that is the right word. Because the ones of us that have been coming, simply just to church. And then people that absolutely refuse to do it, they would rather go golfing, go fishing, go play in bed, not even get out of bed when they can physically do that and just not have that drive at all. To where, like, I miss that. I miss being able to read the Bible every day. I think I would miss that, but some other people don't.
I think to us it'd be a conviction. Drive the same word.
Or desire.
We're convicted.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
and I think that's where the Holy Spirit comes in, that
Yeah.
lives within you.
Yeah, Holy Spirit works on us to
Oh, man.
stir that.
It does me.
Yeah,
I miss church.
do something
Oh,
wrong,
man,
and
yeah.
it's like, oh,
And
yeah.
I can wake up with a little bitty headache and think,
Yeah.
oh, I'm not going to go. And I'll struggle for about 30 minutes. I was like, oh, get up, get in there, get a shower, and go to church.
yeah, that's when Molly reaches over and elbows me and says, "You're the pastor, get up." Oh, fine.
I know that was good when I
There
heard
was a
about
joke
that the
about
other
a
day.
teacher.
It was about how bad the preaching was and just hated the choir and everybody in there. And he said, but you're the preacher.
You got to go.
Yep.
Yeah.
And part of that is also, there is that, y'all, like I've said before, there was a point in my early 20s, I was saved, but if you were to just take a snapshot of any little point of that in there and just look and go, how is this guy claiming to be a Christian?
I think we've all been
But internally, the Holy Spirit was tearing me up,
Yeah, been there.
You know?
Done that.
But you would fight it.
but I'd fight it.
Yeah.
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 Oh, yeah.
Because I was chasing that
Another one.
that fleshly pleasure.
Yes.
Feel better. Maybe not
You know?
tomorrow,
But and it's one of those things where I think there's people who, we don't know what the internal struggle is going on. And I think we've all been in seasons where it's easy to just go, oh, you know what, I'm not going. We've been in situations where, I don't know, maybe sometimes just in a dark place, and it's like, no one's going to miss me. Why do I even bother? Sure, they smile and say hi and shake my hand, but, or, there's just all kinds of things that people can conjure up in their mind or feelings that they might have that they choose in that season of their life, for whatever reason, they're choosing to
I think
accept
Satan
that.
helps a little bit with
Oh,
that,
Satan
too.
absolutely helps with that. Absolutely. Have you ever read the Screw Tape Letters?
No.
Fantastic book.
It's good.
The Screw Tape Letters.
Screw tape?
Yeah.
As in SCREWTAPE?
The premise of the book is, it's by C.S. Lewis, and it's a fictional account. It's a series of letters that are from a senior demon to a junior demon who has been assigned a particular human that he's supposed to tempt and mess up and, kind of lead him. Like the opposite of a guardian angel. It's the demon trying to mess him up. Well, and it's kind of funny because you're only getting one side. Screw Tape is the senior demon, and so you're getting letters from him writing to the junior and going, hey, you're messing up. Here's what you need to do. Here's my advice. Here's how I handle it. And it's really cool insight into how the spiritual warfare kind of works around us. But one of the things it mentions, at one point, the junior demon's assignment ends up becoming a Christian. And so the focus shifts from trying to keep him away from church to let him go to church, but point out all of the little annoying and irritating things. Make sure he's aware of that person's weird smell. Make sure that this over here is getting on his nerves. Make sure that he's really hearing that person who can't sing very well. It's just, and I really do think spiritual warfare, that's going on. That, that while you're sitting there it's very possible that little thing that's just bugging you, that there's an evil spirit going, "Psst, hey, do you notice that? Do you hear that? Do you see that?" What? We all have that. I've been at churches where I'm sitting there and I'm just, there's that one person in the choir where you're just like, oh, you realize everybody can see you, right? And so, but there's little things like that. When I was working at First Methodist on the building staff, whenever I would be getting the sanctuary ready for Sunday morning, I would go through there. I would actually go out into the pews and stand and just kind of look. How does that look? Because I wanted to make sure everything was in place and in order and nothing was just off, because I don't want some little OCD little old lady sitting out there and Satan able to use my, shoddy workmanship as a distraction for that person. And so I would meticulously try to make sure, okay, how is this? Does everything look good? Because I don't want me kind of just halfway doing something being the way that, the devil uses that to draw someone away from a worship experience, And I think they do that, man. There's little things where, where you'll sit there, you'll just look over and you'll see someone who, back of their head's got that rooster tail, because you can't see the back of your head when you're brushing, and it's like out of the corner of your eye. You just see it over there and you're just like.
I try to sit up close because everybody distracts me.
Right?
But now I'm getting ready to move to the back.
You don't want to be the distraction. Now you're going to feel like everybody's just looking at you.
I know where the back seat Baptist came from.
Yep.
It's the ones that come in late.
Yes,
They
I can
don't
look
want
at
to walk.
everybody up in front of them.
Right, and they don't want to walk down in front of everybody.
Just like what
if
I
they're
get to
late.
see.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else about the omnipresence, omniscience, or?
No, but spiritual warfare is the real thing. A lot of people don't believe it, but it is.
It absolutely is. I mean, that's one of those things that, coming from a charismatic background, and I know there are some goofy things that go on in charismatic churches, man, but they've got a line on that spiritual warfare thing that a lot of times the more conservative traditional churches just kind of ignore. I remember talking to a family member about angels, and they believe in guardian angels, and that we have an angel looking out for us. And I asked about demons. Oh, I don't believe in those. No, there's no demons.
Yeah.
I'm like,
I better believe it.
okay. But yeah, no, it's out there. But the Bible flat out says it. We're not warring against people. We're warring against spirits. It's a spiritual realm that we're at battle with.
We're unashamed to say, Lord, we give our hearts to you, so we might bring you praise, and we offer up our lives, 'cause you caught our gaze.